Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is our second. I'm the Scott Schultz. I'm the president of Schultz and Williams. And of course, our work is in strategic planning and fundraising consulting and direct marketing and a number of other things for the nonprofit world. And we've been in business for 33 years. And it's been interesting because we've probably never seen a year, quite like this. This webinar today is the second in what I'm hoping will be become a series of discussions with nonprofit leaders from around the country. You know that they say that leaders are often defined by crisis. And if that's true, and I believe it is, this has been a great opportunity for leaders to be defined because we have had unprecedented crisis, plural. In the past year, we've dealt with obviously the pandemic, and that's wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. 6 months ago, many of us thought, well, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and then the tunnel kept getting longer and longer. Now, who knows? There's good news on the horizon, but at the same time, there's a threat of another wave with spring break, et cetera. So we've been dealing with this for an entire year. I guess we could celebrate the anniversary of the pandemic today. We've also, related to that, it's been a recession. It's had a very significant impact on some sectors, and it's not over. Today you heard, matter of fact, there was bad job numbers today. The recession is going to probably be with us for a while, and that's jobs and it's opportunities for people to keep their families together, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgages. Recessions are never easy, and we will come out of it, but it's going to take a while, and we never know how long they're going to last. In addition to that, the murders of Michael Taylor and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and countless others have ignited an awakening of systemic racism in this country and social injustice. And it's unlike the pandemic in that the pandemic will eventually be over. But I think we're just at the beginning of this long overdue discussion that we're having about equity and social and racial justice. And to say nothing on top of all of that is if we need something else, the election and its aftermath at the Capitol and elsewhere, which is threatening our very democracy. So a lot has gone on in the last year. And this crisis has been defined by closings and furloughs and layoffs, but it's also been provided by opportunity, has provided opportunities and opportunities for creative fundraising, for innovation, and for planning to define your new normal. So with all that said, the discussion today, we have 4 incredible nonprofit leaders with us today who are really known. I know them all for their intelligence, experience, and ability to get things done. They have successfully navigated their organizations through these challenging times. And we're going to give everybody an opportunity today to just share their thoughts on what these challenges were and how they've coped with them and what they see down the road. Just very brief introductions because of our limited time. Joyce Ajlouny, the General Secretary of the American Friends Service Committee, she's the General Secretary, which for the rest of us is President and CEO and leader. She's responsible for the organization's worldwide peace and social justice programs and advocacy. Joyce is a Quaker leader who is committed to help bring justice and peace to oppressed and vulnerable communities globally. She brings to AFSC a depth of experience in international development, education, and 27 years of nonprofit experience. I think Joyce's perspective today will be interesting, given that it's global, and she's used to living in a remote world that's still new to some of the rest of us. Tonia Wellons, Ms. Wellons serves as the president and CEO of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. The foundation has a unique role in the community, as other community foundations do, in that it's both a powerful fundraising organization and a much needed grant maker. Over the last year, the foundation has raised millions of dollars for COVID relief while launching and maintaining strategic initiatives around homelessness, education, and workforce development. So a big job that couldn't stop and be put on hold during these difficult times. Gabrielle Webster is the president and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Washington, and I can tell you that she is a world-class leader. Her nonprofit experience is extensive with United Way, American Heart, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, but her experience and accomplishments in the for-profit world before her nonprofit move is equally as amazing. I think we're going to get a perspective there as a business person and how they brought that to the nonprofit world. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Washington provides programs and services for around the city, around the region, especially in underserved areas. So we can all just imagine with schools in lockdown and parents desperate for help, the significance of having a thriving Boys and Girls Club. Finally, Michael Hill, who is the president and CEO of the Chautauqua Institution, a place that is near and dear to my heart because I grew up near it. Chautauqua is a very special place. Michael's perspective, but it also requires people going there and visiting and being there for a summer season of stimulation. And Michael had to deal with, what do we do? How do we move from here? And Michael may be known to those of you who are from the Washington area in many other ways. His experience is extensive as a fundraiser and a leader for the latest of which probably that you may know is the $125 million campaign at Arena Stage, but also the ballet. And it just goes on and on. If you want to see an impressive resume, go to Michael Hill's resume because it is amazing. So with all that said, for me to get out of the way, I'm going to call on our panelists to share their experiences here. And we're going to have Joyce, and then Ms. Wellons, and Ms. Webster, and then Michael Hill. So Joyce, it's all yours.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for the warm intro. It's good to be with the company of all of you esteemed leaders, and I look forward to hearing and learning from all of you as well. AFSC and Schultz and Williams go back a long way, and so we're very pleased to be in this space. You've been a wonderful partner to us, and we've learned a lot from you. Just some background about AFSC, because some people may not know very quickly. So, Quaker organization. We've been in business for 104 years, and we work to dismantle unjust systems and promote lasting peace. AFSC is honored to have received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1947, together with British Quakers. So this, together with our Quakerism, keeps us on our toes to keep doing good and well in the world. We work, as Scott said, globally and domestically. We're in 17 countries and 30 cities in the US. And yeah, we focus on sustainable peace, to prevent conflict and challenge militarization. We advocate for humane immigration policies, social, economic, and racial justice. So I think that is the shortest presentation of AFSC I've ever made. So I think my comms team will be very proud that I did it in just a few minutes. So anyhow, as a leader and as leaders, we bring our lived experiences into our roles. We manage and we present ourselves as we do because of what we've learned along the way, because of our experiences, in life and in our work, in our upbringing, our values, the mistakes we've made, the lessons we learned. So as leaders, we need to own that and not to be driven by trends and by what's popular. And so when I came to AFSC less than 4 years ago, I came in as a servant leader, Quaker consensus and community builder, but also holding a different type of experience as a Palestinian American Quaker. So I lived the majority of my life abroad under military occupation. I led UN efforts and organizations like Oxfam in the occupied territories. And so I came to AFSC ready, or as ready as one can be, to deal with crises. The global pandemic, yes, is different. It's on a different scale, but it also posed similar challenges on leaders managing crises in general. So carrying with me the lessons that I learned, I had three things that I sort of held on to as I led AFSC through this crisis, and things that I shared with staff as well. One is safety and well-being of staff has to be top priority. Our duty of care, our being there for them, walking the talk. Quaker organizations, hold dear relationships. I've worked for Quaker organizations for nearly 17 years now, and my big takeaway is that we do well when we place relationships above processes and place well-being of staff and our wider community above deliverables and our values above deadlines. And so I think that to me is something that I hold very strongly. The second is that how we perceive work, what work is. Our NGO culture, unfortunately, has adopted many paradigms from the corporate world. Some even speak of the bottom line, and and we try to move away from that at AFSC. My message to the organization early on, when the pandemic started, is that don't stress about work. It will happen when it happens. Forget about tight deadlines and let's take it day by day. So this is it was very true in the early days of the pandemic, when we were all trying to find that equilibrium, that balance of home and work lives. I thought it was an important message to give to staff early on. I think it had a calming impact on them, just not stress the work. And I think one thing that I also brought with me is that I have no expectations about plans. Plans in a crisis mode mean nothing. We can do plan A and plan B and plan C and plan D. At the end of the day, they could easily be dismantled. And so we should draw them and we should think about them, but we should not stress when they are dismantled. And so our expectations need to be there. So the impact on AFSC with this pandemic has been, thankfully, not as grave as other organizations. From the financial end, at least, just hearing the sad news of some nonprofits shutting down or furloughing or laying off staff. Thankfully, AFSC was not in that space, and we have many elements that contributed to that, obviously, and I'll talk about some of those. The diversity of our revenue streams played a major role, but it also helped that we worked internationally and we had some systems in place with a multitude of experiences to draw from. So early on, just very quickly, sort of in terms of the impact on us, we moved to a work from home environment very quickly. I think it was exactly a year ago. And so working internationally and in conflict areas, we dealt with staff evacuations, safety, security issues all the time. So we were ready to make quick and bold decisions before others. And there's one decision that we made that raised some eyebrows. In August 2020, we extended our work from home directive for the next 13 months until September 2021. And many people thought it was a typo. It's like, are you sure? And folks were surprised that we took that decision. But I think they were also relieved that they can rest assured and make long-term decisions and not worry about what is next month. So we made that decision, and that was a relief. So we also had security steering committees already set up, and so we put that to work quickly. Much of our program work had to pause in the beginning, where we evaluated the possibilities of. But because our staff are so passionate about the work, mission driven, they quickly and creatively pivoted to serving the immediate needs of communities. So we did more mutual aid, PPE distributions. Our rapid response was just amazing, from comms and development. And so we were ready to go. And in terms of our finances, we instituted measures like everybody, like we did, because we didn't know where this was going, right? And so hiring freezes, attrition, tightening of non-essential expenses. We kept vigilant, researching, looking at historical data, how donations were impacted, say in the 2008 economic recessions. What did we learn? So there was a lot of anxiety in the beginning, and obviously, and we didn't know where this was heading. The PPP funds, provided us with a cushion and some reassurance. But months into the pandemic, our evaluation in terms of our giving was so positive that, because our donors kept giving, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. In terms of HR, we took seriously the quality of quick care in our personal relationships with staff and the AFSC community at large. Our line was, work when you can. Don't use PTO time. You have unlimited time to do what you need to attend to your loved ones and take care of yourselves. So work is work. It can be delayed. And I think that was highly appreciated, and it further built trust in the organization. And to me, that was something important. We also provided a wellness fund. Folks could spend it on anything, like from online yoga classes or drumming classes, or help in childcare to allow them some respite time. So it was quite open, and staff used it in numerous and helpful ways that brought them joy. So we found new ways of being in our virtual world, from virtual retreats and games and all sorts of things that staff led, and they astounded me with their creativity. And for me as a leader, I think I was blessed with that. I already had support peer group that I was in touch with before, and we put that to work. And I think that was also important, because it's good for us to take advantage of those in our same groupings that are going through the same. This is a very lonely job, as many leaders know, and when we need to support each other. So, but very quickly on development and our experience, I think in many ways AFSC was built for this moment. And our donors identified deeply with our values. So throughout the pandemic and the economic downturn and focus on racial justice, our donors have deepened their commitment. We have done a good job communicating with them and telling them what we are doing. Although starting new relationships has been not as easy. It was helpful that the AFSC revenue base was quite diverse to start. With an exceptionally heavy reliance on planned giving, around 35% of our income. And so, so in the normal state, our gifts, grants, and planned giving streams are almost equally apportioned in our budget. So planned giving was not impacted. Our grants and the institutions that provided us support had full trust in us and had good relationships that they allowed for that space. And our gifts continued to come in, so we have first, we have our donors where are, I think, disproportionately older than 70. And so most of them were retired and homebound, and they were able to get on Zoom. And so we were skeptical. We were about to launch a fundraising campaign, and we were skeptical, like, can we do this? And because we just approved our 10-year strategic plan, and we were pleasantly surprised with the response to our request for virtual interviews. In a way, it was just the right moment. They really appreciated that, and that gave us a lot of good indications about moving forward with our campaign. And I think that it helped that our donors were loyal and long-standing donors, especially major donors, many of whom have been giving AFSC for decades, and so they feel connected to the work. And I think it was not a stretch for them to be responsive to us. Most of our major donors are not personally affected with the economic downturn, and so their giving potential and inclination was not drastically affected by the situation. But as I earlier said, I think it's the time, it's the moment. It was the end of a Trump presidency marked by a pandemic, elevated understanding of racial justice and inequities, and serious economic hardships. Has given our donors a greater appreciation for what AFSC does and how we serve communities in need. And so our supporters got behind our work and in terms of our response and the urgency of the moment. And so they were enormously generous, and for that we are so grateful. So the challenge was more with donors that are more marginally connected to AFSC. So I think we saw that it's a little bit more challenging. It took a little bit more effort to get them on board. I don't want to take more airtime than I'm granted. I was supposed to start at
well, thank
and I
you.
didn't. But I do want to just end by saying, in terms of the new normal and the lessons, just a few points. Sort of the new normal and lessons for us. We will maximize the benefits of the virtual presence. Before board meetings, like no way would anyone get on a board meeting on Zoom. It was like a no-no. And now it's the name of the game. And so we've learned lessons that is okay. We have also made decisions to reduce our office space footprint by 30 to 40%. Some of on our central office in Philadelphia. So some staff will remain home, others will move into a hybrid model, and others will return to what was a pre-COVID environment. But on the flip side, we said we will pay attention to in-person gatherings soon after the travel restrictions are lifted, because we miss each other. And I think that making space for people to be with each other again is important. And the last few points are to deal with systems. The world is fragile. We learned that. And so we need to be ready for that. We need contingency plans, processes, systems in place so they could kick in. And we will dedicate time and effort and to reflect. That's what Quakers do, to evaluate and process and draw lessons from what we have learned. We want to maintain our gains, the relationships, the trust we built, and the new donors we stewarded. Lastly, on a personal note, for all the leaders on this call, I urge you to take care of yourself. A fatigued leader and a stressed leader is no good to organizations. You need to really take your breaks and not shy away from that. And you need to take care of yourself. So I hope you do. I will end here. Thank you, Scott.
Joyce, thank you very, very much. And it sounds like AFSC, this was your moment in that you were prepared for it without even preparing for it, because you had the framework, right? You had the case for support that worked. You had a engaged donor base that was sustainable. So it sounds like the one thing you put at a premium was making sure that you took care of your staff, and you certainly took the rules away and gave everybody a chance to be safe and healthy and well, to take care of themselves first, and then the rest of it takes care of itself. Great. Ms. Wellons, can you share your perspective from the president's chair at a major foundation?
Absolutely. Just give me one quick second. I lost my notes as I was shifting. So give me one quick second, please. Great. How's that? All right. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm Tonia Wellons, again, President, CEO of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. Our community foundation is about 47 years old. We are one of the largest philanthropic entities in the Greater Washington region. And our ambition, even pre-pandemic, was to create a more just and equitable Greater Washington region. We get to accomplish that by raising philanthropic capital, as you mentioned, Scott, and making it available to the communities that need it the most. I'll share that this time last year, I was in the process of two things. One, I was serving as the interim president and CEO, and was in the process of making the decision as to whether or not we would be we would continue our plans to host our gala that was scheduled for March 12th. And this was just around the time when the first cases of COVID had been identified in our region. And I had to make the hard call of deciding to cancel our major fundraising event. 600 people had purchased tickets, our honorees were ready, and we just decided that it was too risky to take the chance. And so the next day, we put together a call that engaged members of institutional philanthropy, asking the question of, what is our region requiring of us right now? And that's when we launched officially our COVID-19 response fund, and really began what has been basically a year-long journey of deep listening and understanding community need, sharing the story about that need, raising lots of philanthropic capital, and making grants and gifts available as quickly as we possibly could to nonprofits serving our Greater Washington region. I'll share that I was also in the middle of the interview process, and I think my last interview was around maybe the 8th of March, and was only named on March 31st. So I'll have to say this has been one interesting ride for me. I made all these promises during the interview process about the plans I had for the community foundation and where I hoped to take it, and just had no idea of what the year ahead would really mean, or that it would mean bringing to bear all of the skills that I developed over the course of my lifetime in the matter of a few months and weeks, actually. So I haven't seen my team in person since I've been named president and CEO. We spent quite a bit of time on Zoom together, of course, because we have been playing the role, I'd say, of community quarterback when it comes to both organizing institutional philanthropy and individual philanthropy in response to the pandemic. We've onboarded 8 new team members virtually, and offboarded 4 team members who've gone on to do other things. But we pivoted really flexibly, and I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it. When I think about, the fact of some of the shifts that we wanted to make when it comes to how we make grants, how quickly we make grants, how we streamline processes, we made those pivots in a matter of 3 or 4 months, and in normal times, it would have taken a matter perhaps of years to pivot so quickly. I think, Scott, you beautifully mentioned in your opening, the trifecta is what we've been calling it, of crises: of global health, pandemic, and economic crisis, and the renewed calls around racial justice and democracy. And so our pivot wasn't just a single pivot. It was a series of pivots and responses, but all of which linked back to what we've been calling pre-existing conditions, the conditions that were here pre-COVID, that the pandemic put a bright light on, and that we're going to have to do even more work as we look ahead to be able to respond reasonably. I will speak to the immense generosity of people in our region. I mean, there were as a community foundation, we sit in the middle, much like many of the nonprofits that are on this panel, we sit in the middle of 2 very different worlds. One part of our stakeholder complement, we're doing really, really well with amazing market gains and the ability to make charitable gifts at a very different level than prior years. The other side of our stakeholder group were the communities that were suffering, people who were losing jobs, being most impacted by the pandemic, and who were in the most need. And so we didn't have a moment, quite frankly, up really just until now to relax, because we were responding to both. We were responding both to the donors who were making gifts and to the nonprofits who were serving communities in need. I'll share, and we just got this number just yesterday, that we brought in about $110 million in gifts into our foundation and granted about 80 million out over the last 11 months. I think that should tell you how busy my team and our staff has been, and also how generous the community has been during this period. So there were a lot of things that I'm super proud of, in addition to the amount of money that we were able to raise and the amount of money that we were able to disperse. But I think philanthropy, I'm super proud of how institutional philanthropy and individual philanthropy really sort of galvanized to meet the moment. About 24 philanthropic entities in our region worked together to support our COVID-19 response fund alongside individual gifts that flowed into the fund. We created a simplified application process, a quicker than normal turnaround time in making our grants. Most of our grant recipients shifted very quickly to ACH payments because the mail wasn't working effectively, and everyone needed to get their resources, their grant payments more quickly. We moved to one application rather than each individual philanthropy or philanthropic entity having their own, and one report that we were all satisfied with receiving. I mean, just the way that we were able to move together so quickly to meet the moment and to make it as easy as possible for nonprofits to access resources was something that I'm super proud of too. And that story doesn't always get captured because it's more of the process story, but it's huge for for philanthropic organizations all working against their own strategies and plans to say, hey, this doesn't matter as much as it matters that we are able to make our resources and make it easy for nonprofits to access resources from us. So I'll very quickly share, again, I felt a little guilty hearing Joyce's compassion with her staff. We were compassionate, but we were busy. There wasn't much of a moment for us to slow things down. It's only now I'll admit that we did some things. We did some things like no meetings during lunchtime. We took half-day Fridays off during the summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day. But we were on. I'll have to admit, the first few months of the crisis, I probably spent upwards of 12 to 14 hours a day in my chair because the phones were ringing and we were being called to respond. It was pretty intense. And it's only now that, again, we've been able to shift just a bit to do a deeper internal look at what we've learned. I'm really appreciating the opportunity for reflection. We're doing strategic planning. So for some team members, it's still an intense period, but it's the work that we have to do to look back at what we did or what worked, and to really be thoughtful in the forward-looking agenda about how we can continue to respond to the needs of our community. Some of whom will recover very, very quickly, and for others, even when we return to work, there's going to be a long trail of challenge and complication when it comes to the timing of when jobs will return, the timing of when school will return, and some of the permanent health conditions, both mental and physical health conditions that will be present as a result of this. One of the things that I continue to say that we've not fully grappled with are the mental health needs and challenges, and also the permanent loss of life and an inability to really deal with it while we're still in this this interesting state in place.
Tony, one
I'll say,
one quick question about your this. You did a lot of listening, but you streamlined quickly. You changed the application process. You got money out faster. Is that now become permanent? Have you decided that, and I'm so impressed that how much you worked with other philanthropic entities in the community to solve problems. That's something that has happened during the crisis that has to be good for a community.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think that they have lasting power? Is that sustainable?
I'm not sure. And it's interesting because we were together, I'd say in lockstep from March until October. And then things began to break up. I mean, it's the election season. We didn't know how all of those things were going to turn out. And then people had to go back and look at their own houses. I mean, they had to take a look at their own organizations to take stock of where things are or were. So we're coming back together in the spring because I think everyone needed the period for themselves to reset, to really begin to say, okay, these things work really, really well. This is what we need to carry with us. We're going to do our best. And my best professional estimate is that we might be able to walk this walk together for another year or two. And then, old habits will sit in until the next thing that'll happen that will bring us back together. I'm hoping we'll do better than we were before, but I don't know that we can fully sort of recreate that energy. I mean, because it is an energy and a driving force and a deliberate set of decisions that, gosh, in order to make this work for everyone, we're going to have to work together. We're going to do our best, is what I'll say.
Thank you very much. It's amazing how much money you've raised and how many grants you've made in a short period of time. I hope you do get to meet your staff in person in the not too distant future.
Me too.
Gabrielle, you've had such a unique experience because you had operations going on in the community, and I know you didn't want to shut them down. Could you share your thoughts and perspective with me?
Sure. Thank you. And Scott, thank you for having me. And to the others, I appreciate your leadership because the nonprofit community was challenged. We were hit hard and we still had to support the mission that we were focused on. And for me, it was all about our kids and my staff and to make sure that they were okay. March 13th was the day that all the schools in this area closed, and Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington has 15 locations in 6 different counties, so 6 different jurisdictions and ideas on how this was going to all roll out. And we had to ensure that we managed to each of those sets of expectations and the parents and how we managed our business, which is really after school time for kids. And, it was just terrible to close. But on March 13th, as crazy as it was, we assumed this might be for a month, maybe 2. We were trying to say, okay, by June, we'll be back. And so we started looking at cash flow. We used to do monthly closes, but everything became cash flow at that particular time. And I will say, unfortunately, the first thing that we had to do was lay off our part-time staff, those people that came in and may have worked 10 or 15 hours in the afternoon with our kids. But what we were able to do was keep all of our full-time staff. And my senior team, we met 7 days a week for 3 months. So Joyce, we didn't take your road. We were on the Tonia Wellons road. We were working diligently to make plans and to shift and pivot and to remain relevant for our young people. I will say that I have never been more proud of my staff, half of whom, 3/4 of whom work with kids every day in the club and the other portion in shared services. But 2 weeks after the shutdown, we were asked to serve the kids the young children of essential workers. So doctors and nurses and police, et cetera, could go to work. What happened to their children? And so 3 weeks after that time, we opened full days to take care of youth, 13 hours a day, when it was scary. I'm not sure if you all remember just how terrifying this was back then, because we didn't know, we didn't have many answers. But the staff at Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington went out to take care of these young people every day, 13 hours a day. And it was a moment where I said, well, if they can do that, then we can do anything. And so we did full days. We put kids in cohorts, and they functioned that way for months until we opened more. We had to deal with food insecurities, but there were still a lot of kids that we weren't serving. So we created a virtual platform called Clubhouse at Your House so that kids could tune in on their phones, because many of our young people had the digital divide to deal with. So they have phones, but not necessarily computers or internet. But we were able to reach hundreds of kids on a program so that they could see their friends and some of the staff. So I go back to April, May, June, where things were just in flux, not on a weekly basis or monthly basis, but frankly, a daily and hourly basis. And so we were able to move through that. Our special events, I'll start there, because we also had an event that was coming up in May that was supposed to be in person. And we postponed it and finally had it in June. It was one of the first, I think, virtual events in our area. And I think much to everyone's surprise, no sponsor asked for their funds back, and individual gifts soared, and we actually exceeded our budget. So we had the spirit of the people in this area behind us, realizing what we were doing. And it was the mission in action, each and every day, serving young people. We were in the middle of the pandemic, and oh my gosh, here comes George Floyd. And I think that that's when the first pandemic became two pandemics. And while these kids, mostly Black and brown, had been dealing with this for their entire lives, it became center stage to everyone else in the community. And they, I think, as one of my volunteers said, there's only one side of this to be on, and that's the right side. And so people rallied around Boys and Girls Clubs and supported our kids and our mission. And so it has been an overwhelming experience for us to see that outpouring and support. And frankly, people were amazed that we were able to do this. Our staff continued to just give and do. And so the first two places we opened, we're now open in 12 locations, full days, and have been for quite a while. We were able to give our staff, hazard pay. Those people that were willing to go out there, we were able to do that for many months, and appreciative of that. So, like everybody else, there has been great support. The one thing that I do want to add to this is our board. Our board was exceptional. They were there for support, but they allowed us to run the organization, to use all of the skills and many years of organizational, analytical skills that we had, as well as a good heart and a good nature and a care and concern for the people that we work with. And they were supportive. I wanted to make sure that racial justice was something that we were leading out on. It's been a part of the fabric of what we do for 135 years anyway, but to be more vocal about it and to ensure that others were very aware of what we were doing, and also to be able to provide grace to people that needed to start sharing those feelings and really wanting to talk about it, but not quite sure how. So I think that's what our board really, really did for us. As I wrap up, because I want to make sure we have time for Michael, because I can't wait to hear what he's saying. But, I think I've challenged my team to say, what's next? What are we going to do after this better than we did coming into this? And because we have to learn some things. We've done so many things differently. If we just go back to what used to be normal again, then I think we failed ourselves, and we've certainly failed our young people. And that's not what we want to do. So I think we were like trees in the wind. We swayed in different directions, but we never broke. And I think we'll come out of this stronger than we went into it. Thanks.
I have one question for you. You did so much, and I wonder, did the community, which was focused on, the frontline workers and healthcare workers, and then all of a sudden, we started seeing food lines, and we saw the kind of some desperation out there. And meanwhile, you're doing all this work, keeping things going for others. Do you think people saw that? Do you think that people recognized it? How present were you in the moment with all the other stuff that was going on?
Very much so. First of all, we spent a lot of time with our donors and volunteers sharing what we were doing. We wanted them to feel good about the support that they were providing us, so that they could say they were helping, whether it was time or money. I think the hardest thing for most of our volunteers was that they couldn't go in and see the kids. And that is the most special part of the work that we do, is that attachment to young people. And so, at least they could say, well, I provided meals, because we have food insecure. Every challenge that the rest of society has, our kids have in their families. It's like a Band-Aid versus surgery. The pre-existing inequalities are so challenging for them anyway. And I've just been amazed at how resilient they are, and the smiles on the kids' faces when they come in every day in spite of this. Although, you have to see the smiles through the eyes because they have on masks, but that they're happy and they're engaged. And Tony mentioned it, the mental challenges on young people now are through the roof. It is, I think, going to be the most long-lasting effect that we have, is the learning loss and the mental challenges for our young people.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That was amazing. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished here. So, Michael, save the best for last year. So,
playing cleanup for this group of leaders is not fair. They're remarkable people and stories, and I feel honored to be with them on this panel. And thank you, Scott and Schultz and Williams. Your team has helped us so much make sure that our message of what we're trying to do makes sense to people, and that support keeps coming. So really grateful for that. One of the big jokes about Chautauqua is that it's easy to describe if you have 5 or 6 hours to sit and listen to us. So that's a curse. I'm going to do my best to encapsulate this magical place. It will be 150 years old in 2024. It is a not-for-profit that has a 750-acre campus in Western New York on Chautauqua Lake that was founded on an ideal that remains today, which is that if you can bring people together from across generations and allow them to explore tough issues across different disciplines, they can go back to their communities and be better citizens. And so our primary manifestation of our mission is a 9-week summer assembly season, which is organized around theme weeks, which are, the ugliest, nastiest topics you can think about, right? Climate change, race and poverty, public education, what are we doing? And we look at these issues through the arts, through education, through interfaith exploration, and through recreation. The other piece of this that Scott mentioned has been our desire, and we've done this at different points in our history, to be more present in the world year round. And COVID certainly played an accelerating role in that. But let me stick for a second and paint the picture of what happened. So COVID, I think we all wake up to COVID as not this fad that's going to stay in China or in Europe around March, right? I mean, that's when it's really becoming clear to us that this thing is going to be present. We normally open our summer assembly season at the end of June. 100,000 people come each summer. We do somewhere north of 3,000 events in 100 plus public buildings, and there's about 950 private homes on the grounds as well. We're situated in a rural, pretty impoverished county in which we are a principal employer. And we normally at this point are gearing up to hire approximately 1,500 people for 6 months to complement our full-time staff. So that engine is moving. And here comes COVID. And I'm sure each of my colleagues will remember this. The mandates, at least in New York State, all right, so 75% of your staff can stay in your office. Then it was 50%. Then it was 25%. And just as you had the plans for which 75%, 50%, 25% of the people were going to stay, they were lowering the number. Like you couldn't plan fast enough to get people out, and then everyone's gone, right? And then everyone get out. Our board convenes in April and May and decides that for the first time in our history, we won't do in-person programming. Chautauqua didn't shut down during the Spanish flu. It didn't shut down during the Great Depression. There were moments where the campus, portions of the campus had caught on fire. It didn't shut down for that. This was going to be the first time we went absent. We had just passed a new strategic plan that doubled down on the fact that we needed to tackle critical issues to help bridge the divide for people that couldn't talk to one another. And then, as everyone on the panel has said, not only do we have the pandemic, but we've got another horrific killing of another Black person that ignites yet another set of really intense conversations about how we have not met any promises about race in the nation. And we're looking around saying, this is precisely the time we can't shut down. You know, we've got to have these conversations, and we've got to help people look at these issues. So the board did two things. Not only did it make a decision that we wouldn't do in-person programming, but it authorized about $1 million of spend to launch a new digital collective that we call CHQ Assembly that has multiple platforms. What you should know about Chautauqua is that we are many things. We get described as many different things. Nimble is not one of them. We don't move fast. Thanks to partnerships with PBS and others, we stood up a digital collective in 9 weeks. It was scheduled to be beta tested for 18 months. And we had no plans for it when this launched. We ended up with that digital collective being, with people participating in 50 countries. We had a subscriber base. For all the people that said the long form of conversation couldn't happen, 85% of the people that started a program on one of the many platforms finished it. Most programs were 2 hours long. And I think it was this yearning and this hunger to understand what the hell was going on in the country that we were tapping into. Like my colleagues on here, I have never seen a group of people work harder, longer. I worried tremendously about burnout. And I was reminded of one of the things that Scott said about the fact that we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. Our vice president of religion is Bishop Gene Robinson, who authored what became a weekly interfaith prayer for the pandemic. And we were passing it around different faith traditions and sending it out to people. And we encourage people to hang it up because the cadence of it, if you read it out loud to yourself in a measured tone, was the exact number of seconds we were supposed to be washing our hands. Remember that? Like they're like, no, wash your hands for this long. It's still hanging up in my bathroom a year later, right? And I'm like, I thought that puppy was coming down, and it's still hanging up. So some key takeaways, because I know we're running out of time, and many of them have been mentioned. We doubled down on people and made a decision that we would not furlough any of our full-time staff. It was a really important commitment. It also had ripple effects. As a major employer in a primarily rural, impoverished area, we knew that if those people left our employment, the ripple effect for the economy, which was already going to take a hit because we're a tourism-based place, was huge. Shared leadership became even more critical than it ever was. Our board was outstanding. I mean, the number of times I was like, yes, we're going to meet again this week, right? I felt like I moved in with my executive committee. The number of times that we had a meeting, and my board chair might as well have moved into my house. I mean, we were just on the phone every 3 seconds. I think you learn the value of your leadership team during this time. The people that I most closely work with for the rest of my life, I will hold up as exemplars of servant leadership. They just didn't stop. It was just remarkable. Resilience was the name of the game, right? And what was fascinating as a leader is people that I would have counted as our star performers before, in some cases couldn't cope, and people that we had overlooked rose and did amazing things. And so that was a really interesting takeaway. I wrestled, as I'm sure you all did, with the notion of essential employees. And Gabrielle, I mean, thank you. The people that still had to go to work, for me, ripped wide open the inequity in the country, because it was mostly the people who were paid least who we were sending back to work in this scary condition. And that's something I still wrestle with from a leadership perspective. Symbols and traditions became even more important. So one of the things we did on the platform was there's certain rituals that have happened at Chautauqua in that gathering for almost 150 years that we knew had to continue to happen. There are iconic speeches. There's moments where bells are rung for different reasons. So we tried to provide continuity in this discontinuous environment for people. And I was struck by how much that mattered. People were clinging to symbols and stories. And I think what happened for us is COVID became an opportunity to innovate, because if you didn't innovate, you weren't going to be around, right? And we were watching things close down around us. One of our donors said something, and I'll end there, Scott, that I love, that became a rallying cry, because we were in the hunt for, and actually in the next week, we'll announce our first ever Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. And we were raising some money to support not only that position, but our work in that area. And I called this donor and I said, I know this may sound like a really odd ask for support, because we're in the middle of the pandemic. We've just eaten through a ton of our cash reserves just to stay open. We don't know when this thing's going to end. And the donor was fantastic, because she said, look, I get it. You have to manage for today. You're managing a crisis, but the organizations that are going to thrive are going to continue to do the work, so that on the other side of this, they put their foot on the gas pedal and they're roaring. She's like, so you have to find a way to do all of those things that are going to allow you to meet your new strategic plan while you're managing a crisis. And donors were critical to that. We simply couldn't have done it. We spent 80% of our cash reserves as a down payment on our commitment to people. That's how we didn't furlough people. And I'm proud of our board for their courage and saying people matter, right? That's not to say that the people that we didn't hire on a part-time basis, that wasn't devastating for them, but rallying around our people has paid off over and over and over again. And so that's one of my principal leadership lessons coming out the other side, is people matter, and organizations that invest in people versus balancing problems on their backs are the ones that I think are going to do well in this era.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I'm curious, Michael, about transition now for you, kind of moving forward. You said the shop was not nimble, but you acted nimbly. You really responded, you innovated. Are people going to expect you to go back to what you were? Or are people saying, no, this is the new normal now, we're going to be a different type of institution?
I think our internal staff culture can't go back. And I think they are rightfully proud of themselves for moving this quick and doing this. I think we learned that, look, I hope it's not another global pandemic, but crises keep rolling like a river for us. So having that ability to be nimble is important. The place is so shrouded in tradition that I think one of the things that we find really interesting now, because we kept CHQ Assembly, we've been programming it year round, we've been doing cool things with Holocaust Museum and PBS and others, and that's now a part of who we are. And but people are desperate to go back to anything that looks like the pre-pandemic. And I don't know if you all are experiencing that, but we have all been, our nerves have been frayed for this year. And so the thing that looks familiar all of a sudden sounds like the most comforting thing on the planet. So, and we're not certain in what manner we get to reopen this summer. You know, we're based in New York State. Current regulations, which we think are going to move, say that we can put maybe 10% of the occupancy of our facilities. I don't know how you put, you know, our business model is based on 100,000 people coming in the summer. How do you open with 10% of that? What does 10% of a nearly 5,000 seat amphitheater look like, right? So there's still a lot of unknowns for us. So I hope we don't lose that nimbleness or agility, because I think we're going to need it for a little bit while longer.
You know, I've always, the one common theme here, obviously we're talking about people and doubling down on our staff and board and the people we serve. One thing that always occurs to me is that I've always felt that people don't give just because you're needy, or they don't give because you're just important or worthwhile. They give because you're a priority, and they give because you're successful. People like to invest in success. So to all of the people who've been kind enough to join us today, there's a lot of lessons in here about success, about, you know, rising above the crisis, continuing to serve, continuing to pull together. I've been very impressed with the working with other organizations, which makes your philanthropic dollar go further. I think that that is one of the lessons now that we are a year in. I think that we should be, as the nonprofit community, should be complimenting itself and celebrating its success through this. And I know there were failures or you know, organizations that didn't get through this. And a lot of there's a lag effect, and people will be, you know, there may be more pain down the road. But right now, we should be delivering the message throughout the nonprofit world that we've succeeded and we've lived through this. And if you ever need any other evidence that the nonprofit world is an essential, you know, part of a leg of the stool, the independent sector, the nonprofit sector has proven itself through all the work that you've heard here today and the other examples that are out there. So I know our time is up. I could listen to all four of you forever. I just want to thank you so much for what you do. We love working with your organizations and the others that have somehow gotten through this terrible place we're in and are still dealing with it. But maybe there's that 1 year, maybe it gives us a chance to exhale and to, you know, appreciate that we've gotten here together. So thank you to everybody. Appreciate it. And I've been fortunate to see all of you in person in the not too distant future. So, and thank you everybody for joining us. Lessons from our leaders are very, very important. So, and it's inspirational. So thank you.